skull and crossbones. Later on, Lovevine will climb up it, out of the weeds. But if you wake up in time and don't hook your wheel off the slab, you'll go whipping on into the dazzle, and now and then a car will come at you, steady out of the dazzle, and will pass you with a snatching sound, as though God Almighty had ripped a tin roof loose with his bare hands. Way off ahead of you, at the horizon where the cotton fields are blurred into the light, the slab will glitter and gleam like water, as though the road were flooded. You'll go whipping toward it, but it will always be ahead of you, that bright, flooded place, like a mirage. You'll go past the little white metal squares set on metal rods, with the skull and crossbones on them to mark the spot. For this is the country where the age of the internal combustion engine has come into its own, where every boy is Barney Oldfield, and the girls wear organdy and batiste and eyelet embroidery and no panties on account of the climate, and have smooth little faces to break your heart, and when the wind of the car's speed lifts up their hair at the temples, you see the sweet little beads of perspiration nestling there, and they sit low in the seat, with their little spines crooked and their bent knees high toward the dashboard, and not too close together for the cool, if you could call it that, from the hood ventilator, where the smell of gasoline and burning brake bands and red-eye is sweeter than myrrh, where the 8-cylinder jobs come roaring around the curves in the red hills and scatter the gravel like spray, and when they ever get down in the flat country and hit the new slab, God have mercy on the mariner. On up number 58 and the country breaks. The flat country and the big cotton fields are gone now, and the grove of live oaks way off yonder where the big house is, and the whitewashed shacks, all just alike, set in a row by the cotton fields with the cotton growing up to the doorstep, where the pickaninny sits like a black billiken and sucks its thumb and watches you go by. That's all left behind now. It is red hills now, not high, with blackberry bushes along the fence rows, and blackjack clumps in the bottoms, and now and then a place where the second-growth pines stand close together, if they haven't burned over for sheep grass, and if they have burned over, there are the black stubs. The cotton patches cling to the hillsides, and the gullies cut across the cotton patches. The corn blades hang stiff and are streaked with yellow. There were pine forests here a long time ago, but they are gone. The bastards got in here and set up the mills and laid the narrow-gauge tracks and knocked together the company commissaries and paid $1 a day, and folks swarmed out of the brush for the $1, and folks came from God knows where, riding in wagons with a chest of drawers and a bedstead canted together in the wagon bed, and 5 kids huddled down together, and the old woman hunched on the wagon seat with a poke bonnet on her head and snuff on her gums, and a young one hanging on her tit. The saws sang soprano, and the clerk in the commissary passed out the black-strap molasses and the sow belly and wrote in his big book, and the Yankee dollar and Confederate dumbness collaborated to heal the wounds of 4 years of fratricidal strife, and all was merry as a marriage bell. Till all of a sudden there weren't any more pine trees. They stripped the mills. The narrow-gauge tracks got covered with grass. Folks tore down the commissaries for kindling wood. There wasn't any more $1 a day. The big boys were gone with diamond rings on their fingers and broadcloth on their backs. But a good many of the folks stayed right on and watched the gullies eat deeper into the red clay. And a good handful of those folks and their heirs and assigns stayed in Mason City, 4,000 of them, more or less. You come in on number 58 and pass the cotton gin and the power station and the fringe of nigger shacks and bump across the railroad track and down a street where there are a lot of little houses painted white one time, with the sad valentine lace of gingerbread work around the eaves of the veranda, and tin roofs, and where the leaves on the trees in the yards hang straight down in the heat. And above the mannerly whisper of your 80-horsepower valve-in head, or whatever it is, drifting at 40, you hear the July flies grinding away in the verdure. That was the way it was the last time I saw Mason City, nearly 3 years ago, back in the summer of 1936. I was in the first car, the Cadillac, with the boss and Mr. Duffy and the boss's wife and son and Sugar Boy. In the second car, which lacked our quiet elegance, reminiscent of a cross between a hearse and an ocean liner, but which still wouldn't make your cheeks burn with shame in the country club parking lot, there were some reporters and a photographer and Sadie Burke, the boss's secretary, to see they got there sober enough to do what they were supposed to do. Sugar Boy was driving the Cadillac, and it was a pleasure to watch him. Or it would have been if you could detach your imagination from the picture of what near a couple of tons of expensive mechanism looks like after it's turned turtle 3 times at 80, and could give your undivided attention to the exhibition of muscular coordination, satanic humor, and split-second timing, which was Sugar Boy's when he whipped around a hay wagon in the face of an oncoming gasoline truck and went through the rapidly diminishing aperture close enough to give the truck driver heart failure with one rear fender and wipe the snot off a mule's nose with the other. But the boss loved it. He always sat up front with Sugar Boy and looked at the speedometer and down the road and grinned to Sugar Boy after they got through between the mule's nose and the gasoline truck. And Sugar Boy's head would twitch, the way it always did when the words were piling up inside of him and couldn't get out, and then he'd start. The b-b-b-b he would manage to get out, and the saliva would spray from his lips like flit from a flit gun. The b-b-b-bastard. He's seen me c-c-c, and here he'd spray the inside of the windshield. C-c-coming. Sugar Boy couldn't talk, but he could express himself when he got his foot on the accelerator. He wouldn't win any debating contests in high school, but then nobody would ever want to debate with Sugar Boy. Not anybody who knew him and had seen him do tricks with the .38 Special, which rode under his left armpit like a tumor. No doubt you thought Sugar Boy was a Negro from his name, but he wasn't. He was Irish, from the wrong side of the tracks. He was about 5 feet 2, and he was getting bald, though he wasn't more than 27 or 8 years old, and he wore red ties, and under the red tie and his shirt he wore a little papist medal on a chain, and I always hoped to God it was St. Christopher and that St. Christopher was on the job. His name was O'Sheehan, but they called him Sugar Boy because he ate sugar. Every time he went to a restaurant, he took all the cube sugar there was in the bowl. He went around with his pockets stuffed with sugar cubes, and when he took one out to pop into his mouth, you saw little pieces of gray lint sticking to it, the kind of lint there always is loose in your pocket, and shreds of tobacco from cigarettes. He'd pop the cube in over the barricade of his twisted black little teeth, and then you'd see the thin little mystic Irish cheeks cave in as he sucked the sugar, so that he looked like an undernourished leprechaun. The boss was sitting in the front seat with Sugar Boy and watching the speedometer, with his kid Tom up there with him. Tom was then about 18 or 19, I forget which, but you would have thought he was older. He wasn't so big, but he was built like a man, and his head sat on his shoulders like a man's head, without that gangly, craning look a kid's head has. He had been a high school football hero, and the fall before he had been the flashiest thing on the freshman team at State. He got his name in the papers because he was really good. He knew he was good. He knew he was the nuts, as you could tell from one look at his slick-skinned, handsome brown face, with the jawbone working insolently and slow over a little piece of chewing gum, and his blue eyes under half-lowered lids working insolently and slow over you, or the whole damned world. But that day, when he was up in the front seat with Willie Stark, who was the boss, I couldn't see his face. I remembered thinking his head, the shape and the way it was set on his shoulders, was just like his old man's head. Mrs. Stark, Lucy Stark, the wife of the boss, Tiny Duffy, and I were in the back seat, Lucy Stark between Tiny and me. It wasn't exactly a gay little gathering. The temperature didn't make for chit-chat in the first place. In the second place, I was watching out for the hay wagons and gasoline trucks. In the third place, Duffy and Lucy Stark never were exactly chummy. So she sat between Duffy and me and gave herself to her thoughts. I reckon she had plenty to think about. For one thing, she could think about all that had happened since she was a girl teaching her first year in the school at Mason City, and had married a red-faced and red-necked farm boy with big, slow hands and a shock of dark brown hair coming down over his brow. You can look at the wedding picture, which has been in the papers along with 1,000 other pictures of Willie. and a look of dog-like devotion.